We wanted to give you kind of a brief update on the workforce. I know a lot of council members and our community have been hearing about the unemployment and the impacts it's having in Fort Collins and Northern Colorado as a whole. So we wanted to briefly talk about this and answer any questions that council or others would have on our unemployment and workforce. A couple of grounding items is, we've been talking a lot about what the response has been for COVID. We are currently in the pre-recovery, and the reason why we're sitting in this kind of pre-recovery phase is prior to crisis, Fort Collins unemployment was doing really well. We were hovering around 2.5%, good or bad. And then during the stay-at-home order, we did see a massive shutdown, and we're in this safer-at-home phase. And then obviously the governor also just announced that the Protect Your Neighbor phase will be starting at the end of June, early July. And what does that look like in terms of the recovery and what we're calling the new normal, just as we continue to have these conversations. So grounding, I just wanted to share a presentation that we did on our clusters. Each one of these dots represents a job in our community as well as in our 5 surrounding counties. And the reason for that is we really know that we don't act in a silo. Our residents and our employees come from this 5-county region. And so I wanted to kind of briefly show you what that looks like in terms of commuting pattern. 61% of our residents travel less than 10 miles for their job. However, if they live on the border of Fort Collins, Loveland, they might live in Fort Collins and work in Loveland or work in Windsor or work in Wellington. So we are seeing, that transfer of employment and that labor shed and where it's coming from. Also wanting to just share with you where our Fort Collins workers live and also where our residents are employed. And you'll see that, again, that 5-county region. So we're really sharing within Larimer, Weld, the Boulder, Broomfield area, Adams, and Denver. But you also see we have about 1,200 residents that commute on a daily basis to Colorado Springs. So a significant portion when you think about how many people are on the roads and that interconnectivity within our regional economy that we talk about quite a bit. And wanting to share with you, we're really starting at a basis of, in 2014, we did a labor force analysis to really understand what is our labor force. And at that time, when we were talking with the folks working on the data analysis, they really said, we can't hone in just on Fort Collins, that because of this commuting pattern, the labor shed, we should really be looking at it from a regional perspective. From that 2014 labor study became Talent 2.0, and the work that has been continuing from 2017 on at a regional level with all of our partners, including the Chamber, our City of Loveland, and our regional partners throughout that. Last year, at the end of last year, we also did a regional cluster strategy study where we really looked at not only the employment number, but the wages, the innovation, and what is coming out of that to really talk about this idea of what does NOCO recovers and resiliency really look like. So those studies are really what we're using as the foundation of the work that we've been discussing. One of the things that I would also talk about is in the last 2 years, economic health has also been really focused on what we're calling the DBEs, the disadvantaged business enterprises. Those are your women-owned, your minority-owned, your veteran-owned businesses that might not typically get the same support that we have been seeing for others. And so we really want to work on aligning education, workforce training with the industry and what is needed in our whole community. We've been talking about this idea of recovery for all, not just those that have typically been served in our community. And, Adam and I, when we were discussing this conversation about how to prep for the unemployment numbers that you're going to see through Adam's presentation, one of the things I would say again is that we aren't doing this in silo. We really do believe that, workforce and the talent is a team sport, that we have multitudes of partners within this scope. And so wanting to, again, honor the fact that this is not done in a silo, that our industry, our nonprofits, our workforce center, our entrepreneurs, our chamber, everyone is a part of the conversation, including our education folks. Councilmember Gorgel asked specifically about unemployment claims and, maybe what does that dispersion look like in terms of minority-owned, women-owned, those that are claiming within uninsurance claims. And Adam and I discussed that at length, and he's going to go ahead and share those components with you as well. So I want you to be able to understand that I just presented is the foundation, and Adam and I have talked about what does the data look like so we can look at how do we move forward in that path forward. So Adam Crowe is the Economic Development Manager for Larimer County, as well as he was also the Workforce Development Manager prior to his position currently today as Economic Development, and they enveloped workforce and economic development together. So Adam, I will start moving your slides if you want to start.
So thank you, SeonAh, and thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to speak this evening, especially on a topic as important as workforce, because we know that it's such a key component to our local economy as well as our national economy. And so I'm going to cover 3 areas with you. The first one is, what are the general or big picture impacts on the workforce right now due to COVID-19? And then we're going to look at some specific populations and how they're currently being affected. And then SeonAh and I are going to speak with you a little bit more about how we can support these individuals, how we can support our workforce and our businesses moving forward as we move into recovery. Okay, so the first set of big picture data that we want to look at, the first one on the left-hand side, unemployment rates, it's pretty quick and easy to see that the different levels, U.S., Colorado, and county, Larimer County, have grown significantly in the last 3 to 6 months. And obviously COVID-19 is, and our response to that and how we've instituted some of our responses in order to move forward has been a big piece of that. And then when you look at some of the numbers as far as our industries, it's very quick to see, and these are drill downs into the NAICS codes for those of you who are familiar with them. They're not the shorter NAICS codes, but the longer ones. But it's important to look at these so that we can see that not every industry was impacted at the same levels. But it's also, if you look at the top 3 industries on that list that are on the right-hand side there, restaurants, employment services, and other amusement. So employment services would be temporary and placement services that a lot of businesses employ. But predominantly, those organizations employ people who are of lower socioeconomic status or have lower wages. So that's going to be important to think about as we move through into our additional slides. So these next 3 or 4 sets of data here, the first one is gender, so that we can start to look at some of our specific populations that are currently impacted by COVID-19 and unemployment. And so these are Larimer County specific numbers, whereas on the previous slide, those were state numbers. So when we look at people by gender, obviously females are affected to a greater degree than males. And some of this is due to our female population being employed in some of those affected industries that we had talked about on the previous slide in larger numbers. And other pieces of that are likely that a lot of women bear the child rearing responsibilities or child care responsibilities in a household. So they are staying home in greater numbers or less likely to be able to go to work in current circumstances. And that's probably not going to change as our schools open in limited capacity in the fall. So it's something we're thinking about moving forward. When we get into race and ethnicity in these numbers, taking a look at it, you can obviously see that most of the people who have received unemployment insurance in Larimer County are white. And this, of the slides, or of the data points on this slide, this one highlights the most that we are not capturing our full population when we think about only unemployment insurance. So moving forward, how can we look at data points that really look at the impacts of people of color, and especially those that are less represented in these numbers because they don't apply for unemployment insurance for a variety of reasons. So that's going to be important because they are underrepresented in the impact that COVID-19 has had on their work situations. When we get to age, there's a couple of components here that are important to look at. The first one is our local Connecting Colorado system by age, and it's that top number on the right-hand side. And you can see that there's that large group, 52%. And how can we break that 25 to 49 up? And they don't do that really well on the local level or Larimer County level. So we went in and we took a look at our page views and how many people were looking at information regarding unemployment insurance on our county webpage that's specific to that. And when we break it out, it starts to look a lot like the state numbers that are reporting broken up by age. And specifically, I'd like to point out some of our younger workers, which 25 to 34 in particular. Now, this is a group of individuals that has an outsized impact. Part of that is because they are the largest single group by age in our current workforce, so that has to be recognized. But the other aspect of this is that those are many times the people in our economy that are just starting out in their careers. They're just getting their foothold in an occupation. And so a lot of times they are the first to leave organizations based on policies and things along those lines, or they're the first to be laid off. But if we look back at our previous recession 10 years ago, this was the same group of people that were highly affected. And it did set them back as far as having higher debt, as far as having longevity in the same jobs, things along those lines. And it had economic ripples that affected them for some years after. So it's looking like that's a group of people we also need to pay attention to, which is our new professionals. All right, and then the next thing, so the county obviously also administers public assistance programs, so TANF, Medicaid, and food assistance or SNAP. And the food assistance and SNAP is a little bit cut off, but it's the middle bar, that darker bar, the middle height bar that's in there. And what you can see here is a year's worth of data in this chart. And so when you start to get to April of 2020, you can see that there's an uptick there. Now, obviously, April is when we saw a lot of layoffs due to COVID-19. And so, of course, that's going to be represented in the number of people that are applying for these benefits. What we're also anticipating is that these benefits and the number of people applying for them is going to climb as we start to see the pandemic unemployment insurance drop off at the end of July. So we'll be watching these numbers closely, and we'll be looking at caseloads for our staff members who are serving these individuals, especially that lowest bar graph there when it comes to Series 1 or our TANF populations, which is temporary assistance for needy family. This is cash assistance that people receive due to low income status. When you look at those numbers, so that 897 there that's represented in April, those aren't individuals, those are families. And those families could be of varying numbers, 2 at least, but it could be up into the higher double digits when we think about the number of people that are being served. So when we think about a TANF case manager having a caseload of 80 to 100, and that's increasing right now, that really is of families, not individuals. And the services therein are serving the entire family. Okay, so this is where SeonAh and I would like to highlight some of the activities that are happening when we think about the short term or the response that we're currently going through right now. And on the chart that she had shown you with the star next to it, we're really in the pre-covery. And so we're moving out of response into recovery, and that's in our pre-covery. Now, we don't have time to get into every one of these, and SeonAh's already covered a lot of them. So I do want to highlight some that are towards the bottom, in fact, the last two. And then we're currently working with businesses that are hiring that weren't as affected by COVID-19 or that are reopening. So we are working to do virtual hiring events, which have been quite successful over the last 2 to 3 weeks. And then we're also doing information sessions in some of our larger industries so that the public can stay aware of job opportunities and career pathways moving forward. And that's going to be very key because a lot of folks are thinking about what's the next move for them, especially if they're in an industry that's changing pretty dramatically because of COVID-19. Okay, so as we move into recovery, again, SeonAh has highlighted a lot of these pieces, so I want to focus on some that are particular to workforce. She touched on Talent 2.0, but right above that, the Work-Based Learning Alliance is a pretty key fixture, and it's going to be for us when we think about workforce recovery moving forward. So work-based learning can be defined as internships, apprenticeships, on-the-job training. It's those opportunities where people are learning a new trade while they're doing the trade or while they're working. And these are really key opportunities right now because they can get people back to work quickly, and they can get back people skilled up quickly in a new occupation, especially when we think about the transitions that our economy is going through and we think about how an individual business might be changing and updating their practices. Well, entire industries might be doing that, and it may mean a whole new set of skills. And then also that last bullet there around training dollars. We don't know through our workforce system because a lot of these dollars either come from the feds or the state right now. There are some local dollars, but the lion's share is federal and state. So we haven't gotten a clear idea of what that's going to look like, or if we are going to get additional funding to help with individuals who are recently displaced because of COVID-19. So those would be emergency funds in our world or in our vernacular. So SeonAh, I don't know if you had anything else to add in these respects, or if we move on to questions now. But
yeah, you know, the only thing I would say is that acronym right there, NOCO Ready, that's the Northern Colorado Regional Economic Development Initiative. And so that is all the communities as well as the Workforce Center and both Larimer and Weld County side working together to really solve these large, hairy issues